We are live! Are we live?
We're not live.
Okay. We are pre-recorded. Today we talked to AFC East. I'm Cosmo Graham, and this is Justin Gomes. Let's get it started.
Okay, let's talk about the New York Jets. They finished 4th in the division last year with a record of 5-11. They were 2-6 at home, 3-6 on the road, and 2-4 in the division. They kicked off the season with a 4-game losing streak, but they did have impressive wins over Buffalo twice, and they beat the Steelers. Their offense was completely uninspiring, leading the league in interceptions and ranked 30th in scoring. The defense finished 11th in yards allowed, which is pretty good, but they were often left in unfavorable field position because of that offense, and finished 28th in points allowed. What do you think of their off-season cups?
Well, first of all, I want to say that this team is in win-now mode. Okay?
Deion Sanders as the biggest bluff.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
But to get on track here, I like Jamal Adams. I think he's going to be the next big thing there for the Jets. He's a strong, young safety, and probably going to be the best leader they could have drafted for them right now. They added some signings on the O-line, the 2 tackles they added in a center. And I like Ardarius Stewart at the wide receiver in the 3rd round. It does at least a little something to replace Marshall. Nothing special, but it's getting there. Although the Morris Claiborne signing is pretty good. He's not super young, but it's a good signing. And that's what I got in the pros. What do you have in the pros?
Not a lot. They should just change their name to the New York Jettisons. They just pretty much got rid of anyone who could help them win a football game and replace them with someone who cannot. Scam for Sam is clearly in full swing in New York. To allude to what you were saying earlier, Deion Sanders doesn't think so, but I think just looking at this roster, it is way worse than 5-11 last year.
Yeah, the quarterback issue is also on the board as well.
I mean, they are the worst roster in the NFL right now, I think. And they got rid of guys like Brandon Marshall, Nick Folk, Geno Smith, who isn't that great, but still Nick Manigault, David Harris, who's the franchise's 2nd leading tackler all time. And they just got rid of them all. They brought in Josh McCown, who I love from his days in Cleveland. The guy's a warrior. He'll battle for you, but he's not what that team needs. That team's not looking for a bridge quarterback, man. They need the answer.
Yeah, no, I think Josh McCown's not the quarterback they need for what they call win-now mode. And the Nick Mangold leaving is a big negative for me. If you're going to have a quarterback that can't throw the ball, you should at least have an O-line that can protect the damn guy.
Well, and all they did was add Kelvin Beachum to the O-line, and he was nothing special in Jacksonville. There's a reason that they let him go.
Yeah. Well, they added Jonathan Harrison, which isn't a big name by any means, but at least it does something.
Their draft, you're right. I was a huge fan of Jamal Adams. I think he's going to be an impact player right off the hop. He's a big hitting safety, high-intensity guy, and like you alluded to again earlier, he's just a great locker room guy.
And hopefully they can build a defense around him as a centerpiece. Personally, I think that's the best idea for them.
Well, and he's got a football pedigree too. His dad was his dad won the Super Bowl with the Giants as a running back in '86. The thing that was kind of confusing though is then they went ahead and drafted Marcus May in the 2nd round, who's also a safety. And at that time, they did still have Calvin Pryor on the roster.
Yeah.
So I feel like this is a team that had a lot of holes, and safety may not have been the biggest one. And they definitely addressed that with Jamal Adams. To be fair, they do have a pretty good tandem going forward of Marcus May, their 2nd round draft.
Yeah, those guys coming up together would be really beautiful if they could really work together and develop well together. But that's tough to do. You have 2 guys in the secondary, and they're both rookies. So it's a tough situation. They have a lack of weapons.
The Jets suck.
They do. They have Matt Forte, who's clearly on the decline in his career. He has been probably for the last couple of years, and he's not going to do much for them. And in the receiving area, who they got? Enunwa? Quincy Enunwa?
Was their leading receptions, or their leading wideout last year. He finished with 58 for 857 and 4 TDs.
And that's a great number 3 on any other team, but not here. Number 1 is not what you need. But then again, who's throwing the ball? Is he even going to have those numbers?
Well, is it Bryce Petty? Is it Christian Hackenberg? Or is it Josh McCown?
I think it's Josh McCown.
I think it has to be.
Yeah.
Why else is he there?
Might as well just let the vet go out there and do the best at managing this team through a season that's going to have some extreme lows and not very many highs.
I can sum up this offseason pretty simply. Either the Jets are scamming for Sam, looking forward to the quarterback of next year, or they're just terrible at making football decisions. Either way, this team is not going to do well.
They are definitely the 2nd worst team right now at making football decisions.
Who's the worst?
Chicago,
Oh,
which we discussed earlier.
I gave him a D+, and the only reason they got the plus is because I think Jamal Adams is going to be really exciting to watch next year, but I can't see this team. This team is just cannon fodder. That's all this team is.
I gave them a C because Jamal Adams is the same reason you gave him the D+, but I just think Jamal Adams is that big of a talent for them that he might be a spark. And if it's me, I'm personally hoping that he doesn't spend his whole career there because I think it might almost be a waste.
I don't think he will. I just can't see this team putting it together. They're going to have a lottery pick next year, and I think that 2018 draft, what they do with that lottery, or sorry, that top 5 pick, is going to be the turning point for this franchise.
I'm saying they're probably coming out of this season with the first overall pick. Now, for their key games, I have them against Jacksonville week 4 and Cleveland in week 5. 2 back-to-back games against 2 teams that they are probably consistently known for beating them. And these 2 teams making better football decisions than them, I think are going to come up, slap them around a bit and say, you're the worst team in the NFL. If they can grab a win off of one of those guys, it won't surprise anybody, but I think it's key for them to at least develop their rookies in those 2 games. Early in the season, around mid-season, against 2 teams that are probably going to be sub 500, they got to beat those teams. And if they don't beat those 2 teams, I'm going to say they come out of there and they're looking like maybe a 16-L team.
I got them going 1-15 just because, statistically, if the Browns won a game last year, the Jets will find a way.
Yeah, late in the season, especially if they're against someone.
I agree with you, though. The key matchups are Jacksonville, Cleveland, because number one, if they don't win those games, they don't have a good shot at winning any game.
No.
And it's important for me because, last year as a Browns fan, you're trying to watch this team develop, but they have this ugly cloud of are you going to go 0-16 hanging over their head. If they can get that win out of the way in week 4 or 5, that's a load of relief.
They're not going to be in that club.
Then you're not in that. You're not worried about it. You're not stressing about it. You understand you're going to be a bad team, but you need that one win, and it has to come there, or I don't think it's coming.
I got them going 2-14. I think they'll squeeze a victory out of Jacksonville or Cleveland early, and I think they'll grab another one late in the season where teams are sitting down starters. So.
Well, I mean, they stole a couple in the division last year, and they upset Pittsburgh.
They're just a much better team last year, even though they weren't great, but they're...
Well, and the thing is, Buffalo got better, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we'll talk about them shortly. So
Miami got better. New England got better. The Jets did not.
No, the Jets, I think, got worse. I think there's no over or understatement saying this team is the worst roster in the NFL. And a C is a gift from me, I guess.
The Buffalo Bills finished 3rd in the AFC East last year with a record of 7-9. They were 4-4 at home, 3-5 on the road, and only picked up 1 win in the division. They had a promising 4-game winning streak that started in week 3, highlighted by a shutout win in Foxborough against the Brady-less Patriots. That would turn out to be the only divisional game they would win. They had a great running game. The 1-2 punch of Mike Gillislee and LaShawn McCoy ranked first in rush TDs and rush yards per game. As good as their run offense was as bad as their run defense was. 29th in rush yards per game, 30th in touchdowns. This season ended with them firing Rex Ryan. They replaced him with Sean McDermott, who had been the DC in Carolina for the last 6 years. And they also replaced Doug Whaley, the GM, with Brandon Beane, who was the assistant GM in Carolina. The most important thing about their season, in my opinion, is only one wide receiver caught over 600 yards, and it was Robert Woods who caught 613. So what did you think of their offseason?
I believe Robert Woods departed too, did he not?
He did.
He did. Okay, so I thought their offseason was good but not great. One of the highlights is getting rid of Ryan. I think he was a cancer on that team and any team he's ever coached. So that's a beautiful thing to get rid of him.
Well, he definitely adds a lot of pressure to the team.
He adds a lot of pressure, and
bold predictions.
He enjoys beating his old teams and the New England Patriots way too much. So I also like adding Micah Hyde and drafting Tre'Davious White. They lost, Stephon Gilmore in the secondary, who's quite possibly one of the top corners in the NFL right now. So it's nice to see them do something to replace the holes that they had created themselves by not re-signing him. And obviously him going to a division rival. I also like them picking up Zay Jones. The guy's 6'2", he has 9-inch hands, he almost has a 40-inch vert. This guy's going to be a monster. I think we're looking at the next Larry Fitzgerald here. And they did some really good draft day trades with Kansas City, the Rams, and the Falcons, which, that's always a bright spot because a draft day trade usually isn't a negative. Chicago. Cons. The whole deal with Sammy Watkins, which I'll let you talk about right now.
I can't believe they didn't take the 5th year on Sammy. That's just mind-blowing to me. I understand that there's an injury guarantee in the 5th year, but with a team that didn't have a single receiver finish over 600, or sorry, one receiver finish over 600 yards who then left and who lost as many receivers in free agency as they did, you need to give him that 5th year option. I think they just poisoned the well with Sammy Watkins. By not giving him the 5th year, they leave themselves in a real predicament here. Like, if you look at his last healthy season, admittedly, he's never played a full 16. I will admit that fully. But when he's on the field, he's an impact player. So 2015, he played 13 games. It was Tyrod Taylor's rookie year, and he saw a couple different quarterbacks. Catches over 1,000 yards, averages 17.5, and 9 TDs. That's worth it for a guy who's still only 23. To give him a 1 year?
And that was his sophomore year, right?
That was his sophomore
okay.
year, yeah. He's never averaged below 15 yards per catch.
So he's a playmaker when he's on the field and he's healthy.
Absolutely, it's mind-blowing. But their whole free agency was a interesting tale. They lost, like I said, they lost a ton of wide receivers who weren't very good.
No.
And they replaced them with a couple who are even worse. But I was a big fan of the draft pick of Zay Jones.
I think it's huge for them.
Man, he's the FBS all-time leading reception leader. He's going to be a blanket. He's going to be dependable. Someone that Tyrod can just find. And like you said, he's going to be like Larry. He's not going to like the block as much as Larry, but he's going to catch the football like Larry. What remains to be seen is if he'll have that after-the-catch ability that Larry did. Only time's going to tell. They brought in some pretty good fullbacks, though. Patrick DeMarco and Mike Tolbert, and I know the fullback isn't a sexy position.
No.
But it is kind of experiencing a renaissance, in my opinion. You know, you're starting to see the Kyle Juszczyks and the Patrick DeMarcos and the Tolberts, and these guys are starting to have a little more prominence than they have maybe in the last 2 or 3 years.
And with them losing Gillingsley going forward, taking away that complimentary back to McCoy, adding a fullback is something that he might be really happy to have, opposed to not having another back to carry some of the load. Go ahead.
I was also a big fan of the deal they swung with Kansas City.
Okay.
I thought that was a great trade for them. They didn't have a player that they wanted, and they moved down and they got themselves a first round next year. And that first round next year is going to be valuable. It's a talented draft in 2018. And that's a big, big pick to have.
Anytime you're not just adding someone to add and you're taking a first round pick in that situation, if that's the situation, I think it's a positive anyway, no matter who the team is you traded with.
I think what the Bills need to do, like most important thing for them in the offseason with the time they have left, is they need to find a way to get Eric Decker on that team.
Yeah, that'd be a nice compliment right now. They're probably losing Sammy regardless of what kind of season he has.
Yeah, I think Sammy's gone next year, so he's going to catch a lot of footballs in New England.
He's not catching footballs in New England, but we'll get there eventually. I have them rated as a B because I like some of the free agency ads in Hyde. I like the draft with Zay Jones and Tre'Davious White filling the holes. That B rating, just pulling them down from a B plus, is the losses of Gillingsley and Gilmore. Gillingsley, a great complimentary back to LaShawn McCoy, and Gilmore, I think, is low-key one of the better signings in free agency this year. So I got him going as a B. What do you have?
I'm going to give him a B+. I don't hold the loss of Gillislee and Gilmore against them as hard. I mean, the Patriots pretty much made it so that they couldn't re-sign Gillislee. Their hand was forced there with the offer sheet that the Patriots had given him. And, Bill Belichick knew exactly what he was doing. He did the same thing with Chris Hogan last year. But the Bills have to find a way to stop this. Your fan base cannot have to go through player after player, going to a divisional rival, and going absolutely bananas like Chris Hogan did last year. And like Mike Gillislee has the potential to do. Gillislee's replacing Blunt.
Yeah, I think
who rushed for 1,000 yards and 18 touchdowns. Your fan base is not gonna stick around if players keep leaving, and you're the longest drought in the NFL to go to the playoffs right now. You got to figure out a way to turn it around. And I think with their draft, they did that. I thought they brought in some great veteran presence. They re-signed Lorenzo Alexander at a phenomenal year for a +30. They brought in, like I said, DeMarco. They brought in Tolbert. They brought in the guard Ducasse. They brought in a lot of players, and hopefully some of them will be able to help.
Yeah.
Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer.
They'll be able to round out some areas they needed to improve, but they're not going to be what helps them beat New England, which is obviously a must in this division. For key games, I got them week 15 and 17 against the same team, and that's Buffalo. I think this is
They are Buffalo.
Oh, sorry, that's against Miami. Sorry. My bad. Yeah, it's against Miami. I think these are the games that will define if they are in the wild card hunt. they'll be in the wild card hunt, but these might be the two games that will be for either team. That will decide this team's the one going to the wild card, this team's the one that's not. And maybe they go 1-1 against Miami, maybe they go 2-0, but they need to perform well against Miami to be in the wild card position. So those are the two games I have, and they're the latest they can be in the season, and there's one game between them.
What's your projection for their record?
Their projection, high hopes of 10-6.
I got them going 5-11.
Okay, well, we are not on the same page.
No, they have a tough schedule, man. They have to play New England twice, like every other team in the division, but they also play every team to appear in the last two Super Bowls. So they play Carolina, they play Denver, they play New England, and they play Atlanta, all this year. Their key matchup for me is Week 14 versus Indianapolis, because after that they got Miami twice and New England once. And Miami, like you said, I think Miami's going to be right in the heat of it. These are going to be games Miami needs to win. New England, they have to go to Foxborough Week 16. That's a wash. So I think that last good shot of a win is in Week 14, and I don't see them as making the playoffs. So just trying to pick up that last one is going to be important for them. But like they also play Oakland, Miami twice, Tampa Bay. They go to Kansas City. Like they're going to have to try and manufacture wins, and I don't see a lot of opportunities to do that.
I say 10-6 because I have high hopes for the rookies they drafted. I think they're going to perform off the hop well for them. And there's a couple of teams in there that look really nice on paper and looked good last season that I think are very beatable this year. I think they can beat a Kansas City.
This is a team that went 1-5 in their division last year, and they're hoping that they found the right pieces to replace the people who left, but only time's going to tell.
And I think them losing Ryan is a big deal. Like, that's going to be a guy who steps up.
Well, exactly. So it's a whole new system. So, like, 5-11 seems way more realistic.
When he's out of the picture, guys will step up.
But I guess only time's going to tell. The Miami Dolphins had a somewhat surprising 2016 that saw them go 10-6, finishing second in the AFC East. Their home record was 6-2. They were 4-4 on the road and 4-2 in the division. Their season came to an end in the wild card game, which they lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers, but they were forced to start their backup, Matt Moore, after Ryan Tannehill went down with an injury the week prior. The offense had a great year. G.O.A.T turned in back-to-back 200 rush yard performances and finished the season with nearly 1,300. Jarvis Landry had another 1,000-yard receiving season, and Kenny Stills had a quality year, averaging 17.3 yards per reception, 700 yards receiving, and 9 touchdowns. The only real hole was their run defense was completely awful, ranking 30th in yards per game. The pass defense wasn't much better, ranking 25th in touchdowns allowed. So what did you think of their offseason moves?
The pros. One of the major ones is the draft, Charles Harris, D-end. Tom Brady's not going to like this guy. He is a big body dude. He's 6'3", he's 253 on the weight, and he runs a 4.8. You know, a 40-yard dash time like that with a 32-inch vert, that's a big man to be passing the ball around 2 times a year, especially against, Miami, who's the only team that's really giving you any slight competition in that division. Using the draft picks right away, adding 5 players on defense, which they clearly needed, out of 7 of their picks, is nice to see from Miami. They already have an offense full of weapons, stacked up with guys that can catch the ball and run it very well. And they're really showing they don't want to be the baby bro anymore in that division.
As Jarvis Landry says.
Scooping up Lawrence Timmons, inside linebacker. At 31, he's got a season or 2 left as a role player in the defense for them, but that's just another thing they add to intensify that defense, make it a little better, and hopefully be able to stop Tom. Cons, I think they should have addressed the quarterback situation a little better there. I think they could have maybe used a draft pick early or tried to vouch for one of these vets that were out there before they took off to the broadcast booth. Ryan Tannehill, I don't think is the future. I think he's a great Alex Smith type, good field general for the most part, but I don't think he takes them far into the playoffs.
See, I think I see Ryan Tannehill as more of like a better Blake Bortles.
Okay.
Which, like, Blake Bortles is just wildly inconsistent, and every now and then we'll throw it together for a game or two. Whereas I find Ryan Tannehill can be an extremely good quarterback for stretches, and then he'll just self-destruct. He's got to work on his consistency in order to be the number one. I don't think it's quite time to move on from him yet, but that time is definitely coming if they can't get over this hump. But, I mean, he didn't even get a chance to play in the wild card game he led his team to. So if Ryan Tannehill is in that game, maybe we see a different result against the Steelers?
I don't think so. The Steelers are a pretty tough team there. One of the biggest things for me is for the Miami Dolphins and their management team is why in the hell are we adding Anthony Fasano? Tight end, Mr. Useless is what I'm calling him. He has nothing to offer this team at all.
Run blocking.
No, I don't care. No, you have G.O.A.T. The guy puts up 200 a couple times a year.
Well, but they lost Deion Sims. They replaced him with Fasano. I mean, Fasano had some decent
33 years old with 8 grabs is just cap space wasted. Anthony Fasano
is meant to run block.
No, he is meant to be nowhere to do with the NFL anymore. He's done. Don't put him in a broadcast booth. Don't put him on a roster. Don't do anything with that guy. He shouldn't be a freaking Pop Warner coach. Get rid of Anthony Fasano. Dumb decision. Hated it. What do you have to say?
So I thought they had a pretty productive offseason, like free agency wise. They got the contract done with Kenny Stills, which like anytime a guy's catching 42 balls and still averaging 17 yards of reception, obviously a difference maker. Devontae Parker came along. Jarvis Landry's still just doing Jarvis Landry type things. So they're all set in the wide receiver core. They signed TJ McDonald, big hard hitting safety from LA. He's rounded off his coverage game pretty nice last year, so he's really becoming a complete safety. And like I said, with the running defense and pass defense numbers they put it up, they needed something in there. One of their best additions was by subtraction. They finally cut ties with Deion Jordan, who they traded up to draft 3rd overall in 2013. He registered 46 tackles and 3 sacks in his career.
Okay.
As a number 3 overall pick.
How many years did he have on the field?
He played 26 games and was drafted in 2013.
Okay, so nothing.
So no value under their 3rd round pick.
A complete bust is what.
Or sorry, not 3rd round, 3rd overall pick,
Yeah.
which cost them an additional 1st rounder and 2nd rounder to move up and draft him. So their free agency was really nice. I'm not as high on Charles Davis as you.
Charles Harris?
Charles Harris, sorry, as you. He's working behind some good pass rushers. Cameron Wake's still there. Admittedly, like the Miami pass rush is getting old, and I think the idea with Charles Harris is to kind of bring him along slowly.
They're going to usher him in, and I think it's a good thing to have 2 guys that are good ahead of him.
And the thing is, they kind of had another project pick with Raekwon McMillan out of Ohio State, the linebacker. He should help improve when he's in, but he's another guy who might not see time right away. And with the strides that this team made last year under Adam Gase in his first year, I don't think this is the time to worry about the future. I would have liked to have seen impact picks here who are going to help this team get over the hump. This is a team that could have potentially advanced past the wild card game. And I just feel like they didn't do a lot to make it immediately better other than the addition of TJ McDonald. Other than that, there's no real popping names here. Like Lawrence Timmons is good, but he's over the hill. Nate Allen's just a veteran. Apparently you don't even like Anthony Fasano at all. And they didn't do a lot to, how do I want to say? So the coach did a lot to help this team along in the last season, and the team did nothing to help this coach get over that next step.
I slightly disagree. I think that they are looking towards the future because this is that time where the Patriots quite possibly could be on the cusp of Tom's going to want to get out of the game soon, and it might be sooner rather than later for what's coming out in the news. You know, his wife doesn't want him to play anymore. But let's move on to key games. I have their key games the same as Buffalo's key games. Playing Buffalo in 2 out of the last 3 weeks of the season. Once again, they need to win these games if they want to continue to even be a wild card contender. Because if you're in the Patriots division, your playoff hopes are being the wild card team, possibly being the best wild card team. And obviously that avoids you possibly having to play them in the playoffs a little bit. So I think if they can beat Buffalo at least once, they're looking like a playoff spot. If they beat them twice, they might be the best wild card team to be entering the playoffs.
What's the record you have them going for?
With a tough schedule, I actually have them going worse than the Bills at 9-7.
9-7. See, I got them going 7-9. Of their 10 wins last year, 9 of them came against sub 500 teams.
They got a tough schedule, so they.
Well, and the thing is, they had an easy schedule last year.
Mm-hmm.
Is the point we're trying to allude to when they finished 10-6. They're going to need to find a way to beat good teams if they want to have another playoff appearance. The good news for Miami moving into next year is their division hasn't changed a whole lot. The Bills, I don't expect to be great. The Jets are the worst team in football. The Patriots are still the best team in football. So their division hasn't changed a lot. But like they got games against Tennessee, Atlanta, Oakland, Carolina, New England twice, Denver, Kansas City. And those were teams last year they couldn't beat.
No.
So I got them going 7-9. For me, I gave them a key stretch of matchups, which is weeks 12 to 14, where they travel to New England, and then they host Denver, and then New England comes into town. And that stretch of 3 is really going to determine whether they finish 500 or not. And looking at the schedule, I don't even think they're in the wild card talk by that point. I just don't see this. Like I said, this team is just not better than it was last year, and last year it took advantage of a lot of bad teams and beat up on them.
I give them a C+ because they did what they needed to do personally, I think, in the draft. The defense is the weakest point on that team, almost every aspect of it. And I think by using 5 out of 7 picks to add defenders and a free agency pickup of Lawrence Timmons just gives them that just above a C grade for me. What'd you give them?
I gave them a C. Like I said, I just felt like they tried that. The prospects they added weren't immediate impact players, and I feel like there were impact players available at those slots. I gave them a C because, like I said, they have a much tougher schedule this year. They were beating up on weaker opponents last year, and I think they could have done more to improve this roster, especially when you have to deal with the Patriots twice a year. And I don't care what Jarvis Landry says, until you win 5 Super Bowls, you're their little brother. I don't care what Ndamukong Suh says, until you win 5 Super Bowls, you should be scared of them.
Well, you know what they say. Everyone's got a Patriot problem.
The New England Patriots finished last year the first team in the AFC East, the first team in the AFC Conference, and the first team in the NFL. They did so thanks to a 14-2 record that saw them go 6-2 at home, 8-0 on the road, and 5-1 within the division. Even though their star quarterback was suspended for the first 4 weeks of the season, they still managed to go 3-1 without him. And when he came back, they went 11-1, and he finished with a TD to interception ratio of 28-2. Imagine he only had one more interception. It would have been 28-3, which was the same comeback that he crafted in the Super Bowl.
All right. Now that that's over with.
They also had the best scoring defense in the league and a top-ranked offense.
Okay.
What did you think of the Patriots offseason?
Despite my personal opinion, it was pretty good. Okay?
It was a damn fine offseason.
Yeah, it was. Stephen Gilmore might be low-key the best pickup in free agency. No one sees it yet, but I think that's a huge pickup for him.
You're high on him.
I am. He's a great player, man. He's probably the best. He was probably the best piece of the defense on the Bills. Brought him in. Brandon Cooks, huge. Remember the last time this guy had a top flight wide receiver? I believe they went 16-0.
Should have won.
So they lost in the Super Bowl though, which was great. Rex Burkhead and Mike Gillingsley. I know people are like, oh, they literally have horses carrying the carriage of running backs there. Like they have like 5 running backs. Well, if you're gonna have 5, Rex Burkhead and Mike Gillingsley are 2 that you would like to have.
In addition to James White, in addition to Deion Lewis.
Yeah, these guys are good, like role-playing running backs. Good, true by committee. They don't have 2 guys like they do in Atlanta. They got 4 guys. They got guys that they can put in the field, and a lot of them are similar run types. But you're gonna have Gillingsley pounding the ball, taking that LeGarrette Blount role, and Rex Burkhead is always a surprising runner in my opinion. Keeping Dante Hightower, yes, he's getting a little long in the tooth, but he hasn't shown any signs of slowing down. And it's a great defender on what you said is the best scoring defense in the NFL. Cons. They didn't do much draft-wise. Considering they used their first-round draft pick to get Brandon Cooks, that's okay, so that's a silver lining there. And I would have liked to see them maybe not add Gillingsley and Burkhead, although I use that as a positive, but if they would have pooled that money together to bring in a vet, that's all I can say. There's not a lot of negatives to say about the team, realistically. But because of the draft, and they are known for giving up draft picks for better talent and managing to utilize what they have in a better way than any other team in the league, I gave them a B+. What did you give them and why?
I thought they had like you said, an awesome offseason. I mean, realistically, they brought in Stephen Gilmore, who was the number 1 corner on the market. They still have Malcolm Butler. Like that might turn into a little bit of a situation over as the year progresses, but at the end of the day, that's a great secondary to have. They brought in a bunch of running backs, which is just the Bill Belichick way. If one goes down, who's the next guy up? I actually thought they had a great draft. In my opinion, they drafted Brandon Cooks, they drafted Dwayne Allen, and they drafted Coney Ealy. They lost defensive ends. They replaced them by trading draft picks for established veterans. They lost Martellus Bennett. They replaced him by trading for an established veteran with a draft pick. And like you say, Brandon Cooks is going to be a dynamic player.
He's going to be huge. Yeah.
They're going to be sending out Brandon Cooks a healthy Rob Gronkowski, a healthy Julian Edelman, a healthy Chris Hogan. You'll see Malcolm Mitchell sprinkled in. You'll see Danny Amendola. You'll see Dion Lewis. You'll see Rex Burkhead. How do you game plan for this team? It's not possible.
Yeah, especially adding a dynamic top flight wideout and then 2 solid running backs. They're addressing every offensive part of the field. They're going to be able to score in many different ways, which in the past maybe they haven't been. Maybe it's always been, get them down to the 1 yard line, pound the ball in. Get them down to the 1 yard line, pound the ball in.
But this is a team that watched 1,000-yard rusher or 1,100-yard rusher in LeGarrette Blount last year and 18 TDs walk out the door, and they don't even feel like a worse team.
No, and I don't think they necessarily are without him.
Me either. I honestly feel like it's a plug-and-play system there, to an extent.
Yeah.
The work ethic there
and the players
is what breeds it.
The players they're plugging this year, I think, are definitely better than the players.
The typical ones they have.
Yes. So Brennan Cooks is enough to give them a high grade.
That's insane. I don't even understand why New Orleans traded him.
For a last-round pick, and I think they traded him because they see guys like Snead and Thomas stepping up, but we'll get there one day.
But the thing is, you already know Cooks is there. What's Cooks? 23? Did he come out I think he came out of the same draft as Watkins.
Yeah. He's a great wide receiver.
It's mind-blowing.
He's fast. He catches the ball. He's a great target for Tom Brady. No, he's not as tall and big as someone like Randy Moss who's had in the past, but this guy is going to be huge for them. And I would hate to be the Jets, Dolphins, and Bills secondaries, much of which aren't strong. You're going to get obliterated by one single duo this year, and that's going to be the Tom Cooks duo.
And even if you can shut down the Tom Cooks duo, terrific. Tom's still got Julian who can catch the ball. Let's talk about that Super Bowl catch. He can make plays. Gronkowski, who if he catches the ball up the middle, the guy averages 20 yards per reception. At 21.6 yards last year on 25 catches.
Yeah.
That's insane. I gave them an A-. I thought it was a creative way to build through the draft.
Yes, it was.
Without having a draft pick above the 3rd round, they still walked out of the draft with Dwayne Allen, essentially, Coney Ely, essentially, and Brandon Cooks, essentially. I think that's a fantastic draft. I think Bill Belichick's just a crafty guy.
He's definitely the best coach in the NFL.
I think this division has the worst and it has the first in the NFL. I had the Jets going 1-15. I got the Pats going 15-1. I would predict them to go 16-0. I really don't see on paper which team is beating them. But again, same with the Jets. Statistically improbable they'll actually go 16-0, so I'll just call it 15-1. My key matchup is Week 7, Super Bowl matchup. They're going to travel. Atlanta's going to come to Foxborough. And realistically, going down through the teams they play, Tampa Bay maybe has a chance, Denver maybe, Oakland maybe, Pittsburgh maybe, but I think Atlanta's the best chance at them not going perfect.
I got them going 13-3. Sorry, I almost screwed that one up. 13-3. I think there's some teams that can steal some wins against them, and especially my key games is a little stretch. Week 10 and 11, Denver and Oakland, both away games.
They went 8-0 on the road yesterday.
They did go 8-0 on the road. Fair enough, but these two teams are two tough teams to play on the road. Denver, definitely the location plays a factor. The altitude. Oakland, rough crowd.
See, but the only thing is with Denver, altitude and all, but Denver's not a good offense, really.
But that defense is one of the defenses that has the opportunity to stop Tom.
But that's not going to be enough because the Patriots also have a great defense.
I just think they have the ability to beat them.
I understand what you're saying. There's a chance there. I still think the best chance.
Two away games, Denver, Oakland, two teams a little later in the season, past the bye week. I think we're going to see them. This is going to be where they're like, hey, we're trying to grab our first place, so maybe we can sit some guys in that last game. And these two games might be the difference between them being first and maybe even second to a team like Pittsburgh or even Oakland, which is looking
I think
promising.
Even if they set every player, every starter in Week 17 against the Jets, the Patriots B team. Think about it. Who would they be sending? Okay, so they'd be starting Jimmy Garoppolo.
Better than anything they have there in the
right? They'd be starting let's say maybe a Chris Hogan, Malcolm Mitchell, Danny Amendola, and I guess Dion Lewis and maybe Rex Burkhead.
Yeah.
Is that your backups? Yeah. Because that sounds better than a lot of the offenses in the league.
Yeah, the Patriots, their B team can beat the Jets A team.
They could be probably more than the Jets A team.
Cleveland's too.
Definitely Cleveland's. Hey guys, thanks for joining us this week while we broke down the AFC East. The Patriots are going to win the Super Bowl again next year. And join us next week when we do the NFC East. We'll be breaking down the Philadelphia Eagles, Washington Redskins, New York Giants, and Dallas Cowboys. As always, you can catch out the podcast, which is additional content from this show on Stitcher and iTunes we're now on.
Yeah.
And as always, Facebook, Twitter, you guys know the drill. Join us next week.
There we go.